Okay, I will call to order the Wednesday, August 6, 2025 meeting of the Oregon City Urban Renewal Commission. You call the roll, please.
Commissioner Marl is excused. Commissioner McGriff? Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Arenello?
Here.
Commissioner Neely? Here. Chair Mitchell?
Here. Thank you. So we do have some people in the audience. Does anyone care to make a public comment? Do you have any cards? Yeah, for items not on the agenda. Okay, why don't you come on up and you can turn in the card after. We'll call on Mr. Nacita.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell and Commissioners. I'm very happy to see rain today and douse the plants in my yard. It's very nice to see. Hope you are appreciative as well. I'm here tonight. Oh, you know what? I just had a thought. My comments are actually on the Cove agenda item.
Okay, we'll hold it till we...
So let me fill out the card, and when you get there...
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I don't see any reason we couldn't. No one online?
Nothing else.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 3A. We have one discussion item on the agenda, and that is Cove development plans. Mr. Conkle.
Oh, thank you. So the Urban Renewal Commission requested an opportunity to kind of try and get an idea of how the proposed developments on the Cove have changed over the years. We went back to the original land use submittal back in 2008. And what you saw at that point was a mixed use development, condominiums, medical office, general office, retail, proposal on the property, a North Park. And then as, you remember what happened, 08, 09, 10, kind of hit the recession. Plans were amended. I think one of the other issues was in Oregon, it was difficult with condominium liability. That ended up changing and morphing into reducing the medical office component, reducing some of the retail, increasing the residential component and flipping that from condominium to apartment. Through that process, that was really one of the major changes at the beginning. And since then, there's been minor tweaks in square footages, locations, building design. One area, what we call Lot 1, is right at the end of Firestone Alley across the street, right next to 99E. The original plan, I think, had 2 restaurant type development there, actually called for 2 floors of parking under it, just to give you some idea of the elevation change that had to happen to get above the 100-year floodplain. So if you've ever been near that site, just realize the 100-year floodplain is approximately 99E. So there was just a significant amount of elevation that needed to be gained. That property, I think, was always, towards the end, I think the economics of it were always very difficult just because of the investment and the structures that were needed. And then, the other component here has always been, we need to maintain, per the Oregon City Municipal Code, what we call balanced cut and fill. So every square foot of fill you add or square yard of fill you add, you need to remove it so that there's no net gain in terms of the amount of fill within the floodplain. So that's why a lot of these drawings you'll see or proposals was really trying to kind of regrade, reimagine the shoreline along the Cove, partially to make it more accessible. Right now, when you're out there, it's pretty steep cliff, a pretty steep angle. Rudimentarily, at the very beginning, it was like, let's go to a 3-to-1 slope, kind of roll that dirt over. So essentially, you're cutting it and you're flipping it, so it's a net zero. So that was, part of the design was how do you provide the access, how do you provide habitat restoration along that shoreline, how do you provide public access, and then, how do you make buildable, developable site while complying with whatever regulatory hurdles there may be, such as balance cut and fill, the vegetated corridor buffer that was there. Some of the initial designs I think were pretty ambitious around a marina. I think There was, the sheriff's facility was going to be in the Cove as well. As time transitioned, as time went by, you saw a much more scaled down, going from, going to non-motorized, thinking more of like sailboats, kayaks, stand-ups, not really having motorized boats within the Cove area itself, both just for the use of it, but also access from the Willamette River. From the Clackamas into the mouth of the Cove. Over the years, we've seen that that rock pile that is out around the Cove kind of start to shift as the river, the Clackamas has really shifted what its historic route has been coming by that area where it's dropping sediment and how it's shifted going under 99E along Clackamas Park out to the Willamette. So there's been quite a few kind of renditions, but like I said, primarily it's been kind of this thought of a mixed-use development. Over time, what you've seen is the retail, office, restaurant component shrink as the residential has expanded from the original to the last proposal back in 2017, 2018. Another component was trying to figure out, how do we get access in there should there be a flood event? So there was discussions and negotiations with Water Environmental Services to essentially have an access way that would take you out to Agnes on the backside as the emergency access should there be a flood event. Obviously, we're not raising Main Street, to have that accessible. So it's similar to what we did at Cove at Edgewater, where we have an emergency access into the backside of Oregon City Shopping Center for ingress and egress to those properties. What we've seen in terms of trying to keep costs on some of the designs down. Some designs included underground parking, which could also serve as flood capacity storage. So you can imagine you can design the underground parking so that it meets the standards for free flow during a flood event. So that doesn't count as fill, right? Because it still can be used as flood storage capacity because of the way water can flow in and out of that. We've seen designs that included just all parking lots up on top, right? So I think there's been a lot of attempts to try to, mix and match what can be brought to market, what the Urban Renewal Commission would like to see on the property, balanced with the regulatory requirements that are necessary to build there. So I provided, it's interesting. So there's a lot in your packet. It was really hard to try to pick and choose pieces, so it felt better to just give you snippets in time of land use approvals or that were designed or that were submitted with the designs. There's a lot. There are boxes of stuff related to this property in terms of disposition and development agreements that have been agreed to and terminated and redone. There's plans that have been provided. They've been amended. There's new plans. So there's a lot of information from the design and engineering side, cost estimates, financial assumptions. But really just provided you kind of just some of the more schematic drawings just to be able to show kind of the transition of the property, but also how some components of it have really stayed the same throughout time. One other component was, through this land use process, the property was subdivided through a subdivision process. And so those lots are still there today. That doesn't mean those lots have to stay that way, right? We can do what's called a replat if we wanted to change, how that subdivision that's currently platted on that property is laid out. But it did identify the water quality area, the natural resource overlay district, kind of that buffer area, the esplanade, general location of where that was going to be located in the original designs. But like I said, the actual subdividing of the property is in place today, but a developer or the Urban Renewal Commission could make a determination that we want to consolidate this or do some lot line adjustments or replat it. So it's not like it's stuck like that forever. It's just where it is at this point in time. So be happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff? I've got one. The 50-foot buffer, it was 100, code said 150, it was approved to be 50 feet, and that continues as well?
I believe so, yes, because we did that as I think back then it was called the Water Quality Resource Area Overlay District. We had a 15-foot buffer around intermittent streams, 50-foot buffer around streams, wetlands, perennial streams. And then I think it was 150 around salmon-bearing streams. And there was some discussion about, is the Cove a salmon-bearing stream? You may have migratory salmon that do come in there. And so, yes, that was approved through the land use process. And, you know, I think if we were to develop that now today, we would go back and probably look at that approval, because there were assumptions made about where development was going to happen, what the mitigation was going to be. So we would go back and probably revisit that, I guess, depending on what was proposed. But that was approved as part of the original package of approvals, I think back in 08-09 timeframe.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff at this time? What I'd like to do, if it's all right with the group, if there's no questions right now, okay, is open up public comment. We'll hear from Mr. Nacita, and if there's anyone else who'd like to comment, and then we'll open our discussion. Is that
Perfect.
agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Nacita? And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. Okay, less rushed now. The reason I wanted to comment was to continue the conversation that I started with a public comment before the last meeting regarding the possibility of using the Cove for floating solar panels and begin a process of developing Oregon City as a self-reliant energy community, both for the purposes of stable economic development and for the imperative of climate change. During the last meeting, Commissioner Neely made a comment that I can see the point regarding the potential for such solar panels to interfere with the recreational use of the Cove. I acknowledge that there's a possibility that could happen, but I want to respectfully respond that it wouldn't necessarily interfere with recreation in the Cove. I think the Cove is big enough to accommodate both. And in fact, I'd like the commission to take perhaps a more broad and expansive integrated vision whereby it wouldn't just be floating solar panels in the Cove. You could also have solar panels on the land adjacent to the Cove owned by the Urban Renewal Commission, serving as a sort of roof structure that could make recreation rain shielded during the rainy season as well. You could expand it further by working with the Tri-Cities plant to build solar panels on the Rossman 1 landfill site on Agnes Road, and perhaps even the roof of the Tri-Cities plant itself. If you want to get creative, you could expand that even further, working with the Oregon City Shopping Center to develop solar panels on its roof, developing solar panels on the Rossman 2 landfill, developing solar panels on the roof of the Home Depot, etc. You could go a very long way. So, and the reason I think that's important, in addition to the environmental aspects, I think if the commission wants to pursue developing the Cove as recreation and invest urban renewal money in hardscape and bricks and mortar, what happens after you expend that money? Where are you going to get the income to maintain whatever recreation facilities you build in and around the Cove as well? I think such revenue from energy production could provide you with that income. So I would just hope you will reconsider and and at least examine the possibility of that kind of energy development. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to make public comment? Okay, seeing none. Discussion. Commissioners, what's on your mind?
Well, I don't have anything on my mind, but I would like to call on my fellow Commissioner Smith to let's do a little walk through history, because not everybody has that. So you have to kind of go back to Glacier Concrete operated there, and then had a different name before that. It was Lone Star, and then it was something else before that. They operated a concrete plant where the apartments are. And if you read any of the documentation on the geotech, there was a lot of dumping of stuff, and not to disparage him, but we don't know what Mr. Parker did when he had that property, and there's all kinds of undesirable materials that are along the Cove edges and in it and around it. And I think that concrete plant was there for quite a long time. I mean, it was still operating when I worked for the city, and finally they moved. But, you know, there was a lot of debris and everything left when they left. The other thing I might add historically is that during the 96 flood, all of that was underwater. I mean, the Oregon City Shopping Center, and if you've ever been to Tony's or Corner 14, you can see where the marks are. Well, it was deeper down there. And I'm not gonna say that, you know, it's doom and gloom, but with the way things are happening in the world and the way the climate is changing, you know, today is a great example. We don't know when that 100-year flood event will happen again. It could happen, it's gonna probably happen sooner than 100 years. It's probably gonna happen. It's a whole bunch of factors. So I think one of the things that concerns me about looking at the edges of the Cove, that, you know, the plans were pie in the sky, and I think they were great to contemplate, but I think we have to really be realistic. And with the, you know, current economic climate, just reading the parts of the geotech that I read, in order to do some sort of a development along that edge, you are talking about massive cut and fill, and then you've got to put the fill someplace, and where does the cut come from? I guess, you know, unless you are richer than what's his face who owns Tesla, whose name I don't want to say on the record, I don't know how somebody would finance that. I think that the idea that was promulgated originally about recreational use, I realize that that's not going to bring in tax increment. It's not going to, you know, it's not going to do some of the things that we had envisioned, but maybe we look at other areas that are just outside the Cove. You know, we talked about Firestone Alley. We could get a better bang for our buck without bankrupting somebody. I so hoped that in this last legislative session that they'd change the condominium rules, but that bill did not get passed. It is very difficult for people today to enter into agreements to do condominiums because it has to do with that liability issue. You know, you remember the T111 issues, and then the leaking and everything else we've heard about all over the country. They did limit some of the liability, but it didn't go as far as I think some people had anticipated. And I know that there are a number of people in our community who moved because they wanted to live in a condo. We have one or two, but they're pretty minor developments. So I think we should really look at trying to be really realistic about what can physically happen. And I know none of us are experts. We're not experts in geotechnical or moving dirt, and we're not engineers, but I think we have enough information that we could make some educated guesses about what we could possibly do. And I know that, you know, in my head, I was still looking forward to the amphitheater and the trail and all of that to bring some recreational amenities to our community to allow for access to the Cove. And our study of it is going to help us get more information about that. And while I can't envision how it would work in my head, but I think something that Jim talked about could possibly have some feasibility. But, you know, we still have to explore that, but I think it's a great idea to talk about it. I know that they don't have a lot of solar panels at the Tri-City plant, but they do recover energy through a lot of different sources, and, you know, they have very minimal electric bills because of what they do in terms of recovery of materials and all the stuff that they're generating. So they're doing that. So I just think we need to look at this with really eyes open about what could be done. And, you know, I looked at all those pictures and I thought, wow, that was great, but, you know, what was the price tag of all that? Well, back then, you know, multiply it 20 times and we probably had to have some semi-realistic numbers, but I just, with what I know that's happened down there and what's there, I can't see the edge of that facility, that body of water being developed with anything other than passive uses that could withstand some flood damage over time. But, you know, there's other places adjacent that we could look at redevelopment.
I know that the process or the evolution that the various proposals went through and how we got from A to wherever we ended up, I
Yeah,
know
we won't
is a
even go
concern of yours, and I'm going to give you an opportunity
Weirdos.
to speak to that. And if you want to call it bait and switch, I just broke the ice.
No, I mean, this is like one of the many topics that I just so sick of talking about, honestly, because we've been talking about it for 15 years and no, I know that. But what worries me, and I think we were doing this at the time we talked about all these proposals, and I think to some degree we're still doing it, is we talk about these places as if they're separate. You know, oh, we're going to talk about the Cove and talk about an amphitheater. Well, we have an amphitheater at the end of Oregon Trail. The question is that big enough for the needs of the city? Or if it's not, then we need a new amphitheater. And then that means rethinking the end of the Oregon Trail site, which is on our radar to do. There's land next to it that is possible to expand that site if that's the thing. It goes back to my concerns about Clackamas Park and the fact that if we don't make Clackamas Park it is a regional park, but it's not a park that is situated for doing massive community events in terms of parking and everything else. So we then find ourselves saying, well, at the Cove, we could build this big amphitheater. Okay, well, then does that change the way we think of the end of Oregon Trail and all these other places and the property that we owned adjacent from the end of the Oregon Trail? We have to think of all that as one piece and not duplicate things. I think there's an ability to, probably have some park space in the Cove that would open the doors to doing some really amazing recreation and having some major community event sites. But I also see the importance of development there. We have these other sites that we're questioning about what to develop on those. The end of the Oregon Trail, we decided to keep the buildings, but what else happens there on that site? We know that some of our community events, our big community events, have left Clackamas Park and are now pretty much centered at the Oregon Trail, but that's only got so much space. And the only reason it's working is because we have a huge piece of property next door to park cars, which we want to sell and develop, right? So then what happens when we go back to this idea, where are we going to have concerts in the park? Where are we going to have these community events, which our communities told us is one of their number one things? So if we're not looking at all those pieces as one and how it all fits together, then we're wasting our time and we're just going to go around in circles like we have been for the last 15 years. I've said this in urban renewal meetings before, is that entire area down below the downtown, right? So, even including part of downtown, but what I would say the north end of downtown and the urban renewal area, the Cove and end of the Oregon Trail, if that is not geared to tourism, period, in a major way, meaning transportation, cars coming off the freeway, coming into the city, buses coming to the museums, going to the end of the Oregon Trail, going to the falls site, we want that all to happen in that place. If we don't think about that at the same time we're saying, oh, we're going to sell this and develop this and we're going to turn this into an amphitheater, then we've really screwed ourselves up. Because it all has to work together. And we only have a limited amount of space there. And that's why I think this body has started leaning towards, well, maybe housing isn't the priority down there. One, because it's a floodplain for major issues with that. And the truth is we have people coming into this community for tourism. We want them coming into that area. We want them parking, and we want them to be able to go into town in various ways, whether it's shuttles or whatever, and not having tour buses drive up Washington Street to go to the Ermitinger House or those kind of things. Then that requires hotels, and it requires parking, and it requires people being able to go between that site, the two bookends that we always touted in this town, being the end of the Oregon Trail and the Willamette Falls. But I think in that we have to, figure out this piece of the end of the Oregon Trail. I think we've answered some questions, like I said, about the end of the Oregon Trail that I didn't, think were going to be answered in the last year or two. There was a real question of whether that building was going to be torn down. The board has been, extensively supportive of saving that building and has been doing a ton of work and things are, in fact, that's another addition to the solar comment, because we've even talked about redoing the canopies of the end of the Oregon Trail wagons as solar panels in a way that looks like the way they were covered before. As I don't necessarily think solar panels in the Cove make sense to me, but in the grand scope of everything is, but there are other places I think in Oregon City it could make sense. I don't know, I just don't want us to think about these things separate. We need to think about it all together. I think it's very real to understand that the 100-year flood happens every 30 years. The last one was 96. So, hopefully it happens before we start building again. Because we're due. And I mean, we did raise part of Main Street, at least the first driveway of the Cove Apartments was raised to connect to that entryway there, but not on the other side. So at least there's that connection, and the shopping center, and then Agnes. But I think we forget, one of the things that worries me about the flood comment is, I can't remember if anyone else was on the commission when the Cove Apartments started sliding off the into the canyon. We were very, very. Oh, sorry, did I say Cove? I mean,
Newell Creek.
Sorry, Newell Creek Canyon. I think we need to be constantly aware of the emergency situations that we have to be prepared for. With the Newell Creek Canyon Apartments, we were lucky that the evacuations took place over Christmas break, where we had a high school we could house hundreds of people. We don't have hundreds of people living in the floodplain right now. Well, we do with the Cove now. I mean, at the time we didn't. We have the Cove now. And then if the Cove Apartments, and if we continue building there, we have to think about that. Now, we know that that's the floodplain, and it didn't stop us from building in it, but we have to understand that we have to know where to house all these people when and if we have to get them out of there. Because even if it doesn't flood their houses or their apartments, it floods the access to it. And we don't have a place in the city to house a couple hundred people during the school year. And we tend to forget that, because this happens only, every 30 years or so, that we have to really think about it. And at that moment, it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Oh, thank goodness the high school's open, because no one's at school. We can house people there. I'm not saying that should stop us from thinking about, developing these places, but we have to think about this as a big picture and how these all play together. And that's a huge, long answer that I've said. I mean, none of what I just said was new out of my mouth, but I want the Cove to be an amazing place. I want the area down by the end of the Oregon Trail to be an amazing place. I want to be able to drive down those streets, Main Street and Washington, in 10, 20 years and not see a strip mall and not see apartments. And that's it. I want to be happy that we did something that is unique and that welcomes people to this town. I'm not saying it can't be in mixed use, because I very much think it should be, but we can't place all of our eggs in one basket. And I think some of the proposals that you have shown are a lot of things that I was excited about, even when the other development that was going to be there with the Center Cal and all of those. There were aspects of those that, and even the last project, there was aspect of that were really amazing. So I think we just need to keep pushing for a higher standard in those areas.
Commissioner Neely?
Well, I basically agree with both speakers. Urban renewal funds can be used for public spaces, and that's what we're basically talking about. I think using this area for recreational spaces will be attractive to the community as a whole in terms of funding, should we need funding beyond what we do get. One concern I have about the Cove is, of course, the water quality issues and whether they can be dealt with. And the other thing is really, and this is a cut and fill issue, is that east side of the Cove is about a 1-to-1 slope. It's not really accessible to the public. And whether things can be done that, if we have areas that need to fill, it occurs to me this would be a good place to get it, to reduce rather dramatically that 1-to-1 slope we have to the east side of the slope. From the Main Street extension there, you don't have access. You won't have access. The Cove comes right up to that area. I mean, you have places where people can park, but they really won't be able to get to it. The best place to get to it, I think, is on the east side of the Cove, but because of that 1-to-1 slope, it's a challenge.
Commissioner Arnello?
Sure. So I was thinking about, just from a development standpoint, 3 of the encumbrance of the site fundamentally are the danger from flood, the money it would take to develop the site and be able to put solid foundations down for buildings, large apartment complexes, as well as the environmental fragility of the site. I think Oregon City has natural bounties that we need to continue to draw on as attractive, including the falls, including our rich history with the end of the Oregon Trail or Interpretive Center, among others. And for connections to regional fishing, water activities, I think we could be such a hub and a welcome space for not only our local community, but also for a regional connection to recreational activities in the water. Creating that safe space, the attractant of water recreation, we could benefit from so much. And doing so in a way that's environmentally friendly, that is an attractant, that really does create a community space, I think is a really good and really smart way to go about the development of the space. Because if you put condos and apartments on there, you excessively exclude people from the area. I think either way you see it, you put 3 or 4 foot buildings on top of the hill, you're going to detract from the area and its natural beauty. But if you harness the nature and the access to water there and create walking paths, create a small harbor for personal watercraft, you create an attractant for the area, which links to our downtown and promotes future growth and connects the areas between. Right now, we really don't have anything between our downtown strip, the Interpretive Center, and the Cove. And this could be a way to help link the two and create that connection. And so by harnessing natural floodplains, creating those natural water retention barriers to help protect us from floods and not putting more people in the path of the floods is a reasonable means of doing that. And I think it's something that the community would really get behind.
Commissioner Wilson, anything?
I don't know specifically, I have a suggestion, what should be done, but I do agree with, Commissioner Smith, concerns about, taking into consideration the floodplain and kind of what goes in there. Whatever does happen, I think needs to be done very intentionally and responsibly. I don't want to see us, get behind a project that has high risk of just, again, turning around and being flooding. What I will say as well, and I think it's just kind of interesting, for being a waterfront town, we don't have great access to the water.
That's right.
Really. And so if there is opportunity to responsibly plan for the area around the Cove that actually gives us, nice access to the waterfront, I think that's a good thing.
Mike,
Yes.
if I might, it is for a future discussion, but it's something we should take into account. Gladstone has a grant to look at a pedestrian bike bridge where that old Union Pacific Bridge was. When we think about these things, we have a trail there already. At some time, perhaps, and probably at the City Commission rather than the Urban Renewal Commission, but some kind of discussion might happen in terms of how we might work with them as we do this planning at this site.
Work with Gladstone, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They already have it.
They have the,
they had the plan in place?
Yes, well, the project got funded and it's going to be completed.
Oh, that's great. Well,
Yeah.
then we know where it's going to go, so then.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of thoughts. We do have, to Commissioner Smith's point, it's pretty amazing if you think about the amount of open space in that part of town. There isn't another community, certainly another community in the metro area, that has all of that land that something could be done with. And it would be a shame to let it get away. It would be a shame to let real solid, active water access get away. Mayor, I agree with what you said, but I kind of disagree too. Yes, it is going to be expensive to build there because of the challenges, but that to me argues for something big. Just like, we have a problem with nobody builds inexpensive houses because it costs so much for the land and costs so much to build it. So you have to build something big. So the fact that that's going to be challenging, I think, means it needs a big vision. I don't know, but I think what if I'm trying to kind of pull some consensus out of this, what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the water piece of it kind of needs to drive the discussion. We need to figure out what we want to do as far as providing access and what kind of facilities, and then the development works around that instead of the other way around. Is that?
I agree. That's what I think the problem was before, is that somebody dangled a bunch of really spectacular, splashy stuff, and everybody said, yeah, let's do it. The amenity, again, that's why we're doing this water quality study. The amenity needs to drive what happens there. I agree with what Lori said. What I didn't like about some of those drawings is that all those units were keeping people from being able to be there. That's, if you look at some of this waterfront in Hawaii, can you see, if you're a couple blocks back, can you see the ocean? No. And I don't think that we should allow for that type of development to happen that takes away view sheds, because that's one of the things that we do have here. We have a lot of places you can look somewhere and you can see what's going on and it's beautiful. But I think to block that off with just a whole, like it was showing there, a whole big row of buildings. I mean, I think one of the things that I agree with Commissioner Smith and I disagree with him. I don't think that it is our responsibility to provide a Tom McCall waterfront park venue here. That is not what we are about. I don't want to see our community become that. I don't think that's right-sized for our community. I think that what we plan for our event venues need to be right-sized for us, regardless of tourism and all of that. But I think trying to think about, well, how are we going to have these I mean, do we really want gigantic events here? I don't know. I mean, I remember, as you do, when we had all of our concerts in the park behind the library. And we all nicely fit there until we didn't. And now it has gotten, more popular. We have people coming from other communities who like to come, they go around and go to all the bands. They play in different communities over time. So I mean, I think that's great. And I think we do have to look at, like you said, how to right-size that for our residents. I mean, to me, that's our priority. And the tourists will come. We right-size it for us. They will come because they're going to want to see what's going on. It's very exciting. And I think that'll happen regardless. We've been doing a better job of getting that information out. And, just evidenced by the last probably 3 concerts in the park, they were packed. And that's good.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think you do have a consensus in leading with the idea of how do we create an amenity. And again, Rocky, don't get me wrong. I wasn't talking about an amphitheater that would be in competition with, it was a very small one, so we have to have different spots for different types of events. Not everything's going to be the big Foo Fighters tribute band.
No, and that's not what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
but I
I'm
mean-
just saying, if we just take concerts to the park as it is now, it's big, right? And I'm not arguing it needs to be bigger. I'm just saying, if it stays exactly the same size it is now, and we build on the parking, then we have a problem.
Yeah, if we don't, yeah. Well,
So we have to acknowledge that even our basic community events, the size they are now,
yeah.
if they are so demanded by the public, then we have to acknowledge that, and we have to have places for those to exist.
Right.
And
We also need to be
right
thinking
now,
about
I
alternate
think we're pushing
transportation.
it.
Does everybody have to drive there?
Well,
We don't
that too.
have that infrastructure in place to be able to take people from one place to the other, so everybody
And
doesn't
that's my
have to
point.
drive their
That's why
car.
if there's a development on the Cove or a development on the Rossman landfill, it needs to be shared parking, it needs to
Sure,
be parking
I
garages,
totally
it needs to
agree.
be shuttles, it needs to be everything that drives the tourism in this
Yeah,
town, not just
I don't
a shopping
disagree.
center.
And we also have to keep in mind that whatever we do, we have to be able to figure out a way to pay for it. It has to have some kind of ROI. There's got to be a revenue piece to this too, obviously. No, bake sales won't do it.
I'm repeating something, but, it's really dangerous down there. You got the parking on the other side of the street. Pedestrians are going back and forth. The traffic is so terribly slow because they're looking for the pedestrians. It's well controlled, but the point is, that's not that one side of the street is not a good place to have parking. And that's what, I think that's what Broggy was alluding to.
Well, they're still speeding down Washington Street by the Trail Center, even
Well,
when.
not when the concerts are, and they can't.
Yeah.
Anything else from anyone? I want to try to end us by about 10 to 7 because we have a swearing in tonight and a pretty full agenda, it appears. So,
It just looks
It is-
cool. Most of it's on consent.
well, we'll see. That's a dangerous comment. Anything else anyone wants to add? Mr. Graham, any thoughts?
I'm just enjoying the visioning of what you're talking about. Of course, you got to pay for it. That's why you have urban renewal.
Right. Good point. And I think our ongoing water study is good timing too. That may help. That'll give us some answers. And Commissioner Smith, help us figure out how we make that big discussion happen, to connect all of those.
If I knew that, we wouldn't be still sitting here doing it.
Bring up a problem, you have to bring up the solution, don't you? Does anybody have anything else in the commission? Any communications?
No, nothing else tonight?
Okay. Anything from
Thank you for
anyone?
pulling the information together.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there was one question I was going to ask, and well, never mind. It's way too far in the weeds. It'll be for another night. Anything else? All right, thank you all. We're adjourned, and we'll start the commission meeting on time at 7, I assume? I think so. Okay, thank you.